Chapter 3. Winter is coming. Jon, along with Tormund and some of the free folk warriors, were waiting patiently under the cover of darkness graciously provided by the thick trees a few miles out from the gift. Jon once again took a peek from behind the tree he was hiding and saw a few guards standing vigil at the outer walls of Last Hearth. The only reason he could see them clearly was because of the burning torch the guard was staying close to. It was a foolish mistake, but in this heavy snow, it was understandable to be as warm as possible. Unfortunately, this would be the guard's last mistake. Jon nodded to Tormund, and the unofficial leader of the Free Folk took 15 men with him, and moved farther left from their current position. Jon concentrated, and a few owls that he had warged into flew from the trees to settle inside the walls of Last Hearth. Unlike normal castles, Last Hearth has weak walls, especially considering half the wall is made of wood rather than stone. After making sure the castle was underguarded and most of the guards were asleep, Jon decided to start. Aim above their neck. Jon ordered 2 of his archers, and they carefully took aim and let the arrows fly. The first arrow found its mark on one of the guards' throat. The other found another guard's eye and was killed instantly. Tormund's men were not idle, as 2 archers from their company stepped forward and fired their own arrows. Both found their mark on 2 men upon a watchtower. Jon signaled to pause and pull back as a group of 5 Umbermen with 2 hounds came around the castle wall. If they find the dead men, then a fight will break out which will take out Jon's advantage. Without wasting any time, he warged into the hounds and led the 2 archers with him further right, close to the position of the patrolling guards. As the guards came into Jon's immediate line of sight, he made the hounds turn on their masters. The brief moment of surprise was enough for 2 arrows to find their marks, while the hounds tore off the flesh from the hands of 2 guards. Just as they let out a scream, 2 arrows silenced them. The last guard, who tried to make a run for his life, didn't get far as Ghost's jaw clamped on the guard's throat. In a shower of blood, the last guard fell and the night was silent once again. Jon once again observed the castle through the owls inside and noted that a few guards are stepping out of the castle, probably because they heard some of the screams. It doesn't matter because they won't be able to do much in the next few minutes. Jon nodded to the men, and they carried over a long enough wooden pole that they managed to scourge off from the forest near Last Hearth. It was not much of a ladder, but using a scythe they had managed to carve out some grooves. The makeshift ladder was carefully set on the ground, and slowly the other end touched the top of the wall. One of the men tied a rope around his leg and started the climb, using the rope to lock into the grooves. As the guy made to the top, he waited for Jon's instruction. Jon was observing the Umber guards who had returned to their posts, probably thinking that they imagined the scream. Jon gave the signal, and the man climbed over the wall and ran straight to the watchtower and tied the rope he was carrying. He threw the other end of the rope down, and one by one the free folk climbed over the wall, as did Jon. If Jon was being pragmatic, he really had to thank the Red Wedding for cutting down the bulk of the Northern Army, as House Umber has also suffered some significant losses. That was the only reason why the men in the ancestral home of Umbers were this few in numbers. If the Red Wedding hadn't happened, then Jon wouldn't be forced to do this as well, which made his earlier point moot. One by one they silently climbed down the wall using ropes. Jon signaled them to pause, and he sent the owls into the castle. The winged creatures glided through the open corridors without making much sound. Even still, the flapping of the wings did wake some of the guards, but they went back to sleep once they saw it was just some owl. Jon gave the signal, and once again their group split into 2 each, following Jon and Tormund respectively. While Tormund took the eastern corridor that led to the library and quarters for the Umber guards, Jon took one that led to the Lord's quarters and the Ravenry. Jon walked forward. The men that followed him began to slice the throats of the guards one by one. Soon the castle was filled with screams as the free folk cut a bloody swathe through the ancestral home of Umbers. While this happened, Jon walked through the corridor feeling not a shred of guilt at the amount of blood he was spilling. Most of the men dying around him probably had no part in what small Jon Umber's treachery, but dealing with these men was never about revenge or justice. It was a political statement, and a warning to all those who stand against House Stark. But to truly make that statement strong, a lot of death is needed, even if the majority of them were innocents. It was a necessary act because that was the only way that John could establish his power base, and that's why John had no qualms stabbing an unarmed man straight through his abdomen. He didn't wait for the guy to properly gasp before he pushed him away from Longclaw and sliced the head clean off from a wounded soldier nearby. Spread out and kill anyone that remotely looks like a threat, but don't burn anything or rape any woman. If you do, be prepared to be short of a head, and that will be least of your worries. John ordered and continued to fight his way into the Lord's quarters. Already they had secured the ravelry from the maester, and with the old man knocked out, no ravens will be sent from the castle. John continued to advance, and more umbermen were cut down. Finally, they reached the Lord's quarters but found them to be empty. John immediately warged into the owls, and he knew where his target was. "Two of you follow me," John ordered, and immediately rushed through a small pathway and jumped through a window, closely followed by two of his men. They landed on the open courtyard on the west side of the castle, and John could see a few guards trying to open the gates. But his eyes locked onto a tall figure on a horse surrounded by two large, bulky men. The two men that followed John into the courtyard were archers, and they immediately dispatched the men trying to unlock the gate. The fully awakened castle was by now filled with screaming women and children as their men were being slaughtered without mercy. "I suspect you are Mors Umber and Hother Umber along with Ned Umber. Surrender now or watch as your people suffer the consequences," John demanded, and by that time the free folk had dispatched the Umber guards for good, and only two of them were left who were protecting Ned Umber with Mors and Hother. "You are Jon Snow, aren't ya? Consorting with wildlings. Your ancestors will be rolling in their graves, boy, and we Umbers will never surrender to wildlings." Mors barked out in rage as he unsheathed his blade, but John stayed the hand of his archers. "Maybe, but that's my decision, and if you had such strong problems with me, you should have taken it out on me. Instead, you broke guest rights and handed over Rickon Stark to the flayed man. I believe your ancestors will be rolling on their graces too." John fired back, "House Stark is dead. You, Starks, have destroyed the North with your foolishness." Hother Umber screamed while glaring hatefully at the free folk warriors. John had heard rumors that a daughter of Hother Umber was taken in a wildling raid, and the hate that he could see in the castellan of Last Hearth proves this to be true. But John didn't have the luxury to sympathize with his enemies, so he decided to end the battle for Last Hearth for good. "So long as I am breathing and my sisters are breathing, House Stark is not dead. But House Umber, on the other hand, is going to die by my own hands." John sneered and unsheathed Dark Sister from his back. Armed with two swords, he moved forward while the free folk and much of the surviving inhabitants of Last Hearth watched on. The two guards that were still standing beside the Umbers were the first to charge forward on their horses. John ducked from their swords while he stabbed Dark Sister through the back of one of the guards. The man screamed in pain and fell off his horse, and after a century Dark Sister finally tasted blood once again. The other guard screamed in rage, and he began to hack and swipe wildly atop the horse. John easily parried a wide blow with Longclaw, and that left the guard exposed, which John used by stabbing the guard straight through his stomach. The guard fell from his horse, slowly bleeding to death on the ground. John kicked away the swords, not get a surprise attack just in case the guards were bold enough to try for one. With the last two Umber guards dead, John gave his undivided attention to the three Umbers. "I would have thought both of you to join that traitor in Winterfell," John commented as he spun Dark Sister in his left hand and held it in a backhanded grip, while he positioned Longclaw in his right, ready to spill the blood of Umbers. Mor and Hother numbered down from their horses and charged at John with their swords. John parried a swipe from Mors while ducking another from Hother and positioned himself right at the middle of the two brothers. From there John weaved his sword expertly in fluid motions, keeping the Umber brothers at bay with the speed of his attacks. The Valyrian steel blade sang as it cut through the air, expertly blocking and parrying the blows from the Umbers. John blocked a jab from Mors, and he quickly knelt and spun on his knee. Longclaw flashed, and in a shower of blood Hother was cut down at his knees as his right leg was clearly separated. Mor wailed as his brother fell and increased his power to his swings in his rage. Jon slowly moved back, blocking each blow with Dark Sister, and quickly he turned tables by stepping in closer and plunged Dark Sister straight through Mor's neck while he used Longclaw to block the strike from the elderly Umber. The switching of defense by Jon had taken Mor's completely by surprise, and the large, burly man fell on his knees. Jon kicked Mor's on his chest, and the man fell on his back, staring vacantly into the night sky. Jon slowly turned to see Hother sobbing at the death of his brother, but the giant of a man climbed to his single knee, staring defiantly at Jon. "You and your wildlings will die, you Badar." Hother didn't get to complete his sentence, as Jon cut his head off with Longclaw in a single swipe. The headless corpse fell in slow motion, and when it fell last, Hearth remained eerily silent except for Ned Umber, who was sobbing upon his horse at the fate of his family. "Well met, Lord Umber. I am sure you will find me quite likable, and so will your brother soon enough." Jon smirked, and the free folk took the boy down from his horse and bound him in ropes. "The chained man you spoke of, Jon?" Tormund pushed the old maester forward, and Jon noted that outside of a few scratches on his cheek, the maester was unharmed. "What is your name, maester?" Jon asked as he cleaned the blood on his blades using the cloak of Mor's Umber. "Vormer, my lord." "What will you do with Ned?" "He is just a boy. Please don't harm him for his brother's mistake." I pleaded with Lord Umber to not break guest rights, but he was blinded by his rage and loss. The old maester explained as he cast concerned glances at the young Umber Lord. "Ned Umber will be unharmed so long as Rickon Stark remains unharmed. Now I have some questions for you, maester, and I implore you to answer truthfully." "Can you do that?" Jon asked, and at the reluctant nod of the old maester, he plowed on. "How many Umber men have joined with the Boltons?" Jon asked. 200 men, my lord." There were at least 50 men in the castle. Were they supposed to stay here, or were they intending to join the Boltons in Winterfell? Jon asked, and he could see the maester was reluctant to divulge that piece of information. "I would like to remind you that your vows are bound to this castle, and like it or not, this castle has fallen to me. That means I am the acting lord of Last Hearth. Answer me truthfully, Maester Vormer." Jon snapped, running low of the little patience he had left. The men were supposed to join a host of Karstark men and march on Winterfell to join forces with Lord Bolton. Master Vormer said quickly, which made Jon a little suspicious. Why would Umbers and Karstarks delay their march and do it separately? Why the delay, and why didn't everyone march to Winterfell right away? Jon asked curiously. "The bulk of the Karstark and Umber men have already marched out, my lord. But weapons and food are needed to be escorted to Winterfell. The storms delayed the caravan, and that's why the delayed march." Maester Vormer answered truthfully. Jon's eyes lit up in understanding, and he silently began to think. He had only come here with 30 men, and on hindsight, it was not a good idea. If he had known this information, he would have brought more men. They would not have been able to strike as quickly as they did, but still to think that he could have dealt with both the Umbers and Karstarks. It was a missed opportunity, but he was not that much disappointed. If only I had more time. Time? When will the Karstarks be here, Maester? Asked Jon, hoping that he was blessed with a sudden stroke of luck. By next week, my lord. It was hoped that the caravan could reach the Lonely Hills by within 2 weeks, and continue the journey before more snow set in. Master Vormer explained, and that put Jon at ease because he still had time to call for reinforcements. So who would like to ride all the way back to the gift, and lead 40 men here before first light? Jon asked, and he was exasperated to note that the men were looking at each other, clearly not looking forward to riding all the way to the gift in this cold night. Fine, you have to only travel on the first light. Jon conceded, and he won him a volunteer. Now, all that was left to do was to plan the ambush for the Karstark forces. For the rest of the night, Jon stayed awake just in case, but his vigilance was for naught because the night passed without any incident. When first light shined on Last Hearth, he sent a rider to the gift asking for that reinforcement, all the while he prepared the trap for the Karstark men. As a first step, he made all the free folk men shed their clothing in favor of some leather and iron armor from the dead Umber guards. All the bronze weapons of the free folk were replaced by steel swords, steel-tipped spears/arrows, maces and axes. Then the dead Umber men were replaced by the free folk disguised as Umber men. Then they began the long wait. The reinforcements that John requested arrived a little early than he predicted, as the free folk were a hardy bunch, and he equipped them as quickly as he could and described his plan in detail. Meret had served the Karstarks as long as he could remember. When the children of Lord Rickard were murdered by the Kingslayer, he was there demanding justice from the young wolf. Fat load of good that did, and the Kingslayer was set free by the Stark boy's own mother. As if that was not enough, the upstart had the gall to cut off the head of Lord Rickard for killing a few Lannisters. He didn't understand what the king was supposedly thinking. After all, the North had assembled to kill the Lannisters in the first place. What does it matter if the Lannisters were killed in captivity or in battle? The Lannisters had no qualms in killing several of good Northmen in captivity. It was by that point that Meret, as well as many Karstark men, saw no reason to stick around under the thumb of the foolish boy. So right after Lord Rickard's execution, he had marched the entire Karstark army back to Karhold. A few weeks later he let out a sigh of relief when he learned about the Red Wedding. On one hand, the Stark boy was dead, and that meant the Karstarks will be free from any retribution from the Starks. But the Boltons now controlled the North, at least in name, and Lord Harald became the Lord of Karhold. Lord Harald has great plans, and it involved destroying the Boltons and taking the North from the flayed men. The Karstarks are descended from the Starks, and in the absence of a male Stark, Winterfell should go to Lord Harald. With Roose Bolton dead, his lord's ambitions were about to be fulfilled. When the Bolton forces fight with the Starks, one will be wiped out while the other will be weakened. That will be the time Lord Harald will deliver the final blow and take the North from the fool of a bastard. In the end, the Karstarks will rule the North. All of that will come to pass, but first, he had to lead the caravan to Winterfell, and the Umbers will soon join them on their long march to Winterfell. Meret saw a scout riding hard towards him, and realized it was one of his own. "The gates are open, Captain. The Umbers are ready." The scout reported, "Of course they are. To me, men. Last hearth awaits." Meret ordered, and he led his men straight to the ancestral seat of Umbers. As he rode into the castle, he noted that the castle was thick with tension. He could feel it in the air, and his instincts were flaring up. Before he could act on it, the men that were stationed on the walls of the castle began to rain down arrows at his men, spreading chaos and death. "To me, men. To me." Meret tried to rally the men, but his forces became further disorganized when a large group of men attacked from their rear, boxing them into the gates, trapping his company. He couldn't call for a retreat, which left him the only option to fight out of this trap. He cursed as he saw rushing out of the castle and began cutting down his men. He took the head of a man that dared to charge him and resigned himself to fight to the death. He dismounted from his horse and stabbed a man through his abdomen, and was rewarded with a strike to his nose by the dying man. The blow disoriented him, and he was about to slash open the back of another soldier, but a short blocked his attack. Even with his blurry vision, he could make out the ripple patterns on the sword and the wolf pommel. All around him he could make out his men falling in droves, screaming as they died one after the other. "Jon Snow." That was his last words, as he felt a flash of pain in his neck, and he knew no more. When Meret regained his consciousness, he was very much confused. He looked around in wonder, as he was once again riding his own horse. Where was the battle? What happened in Last Hearth? Where the hell was he? He was surrounded by men who were holding the banners of the White Sun, but he knew none of them. Then one of them rode alongside him on a horse, and he felt a flash of recognition. "Glad to see you back among the living. Your name is Meret, right? I was planning on slaughtering you all, but I have a better idea, my dear friend. You are going to help me take Karhold," said Jon Snow. "I will die rather than sell out House Karstark, you bastard." Merritt snarled and his hand went for his sword but found none at his hip. You are loyal to the Karstarks. I respect that, but unfortunately for you, I don't need your permission. I have not tried this yet, but if it is painful for you, then know that it is completely unintentional," said Jon Snow with an apologetic tone. "What are you talking about?" Merritt trailed off as he flinched in fear when the dark gray eyes of Jon Snow turned pearl white, and once again he knew no more. But unlike the first time, he was horrified to note that he was not unconscious but rather trapped in his own mind. He was not allowed to move, make a sound, or even think. He watched on with growing horror as the guards of Karhold opened the gates and unknowingly let the Stark army in all on his own orders. He was powerless to stop it, and watched as the Starks wreaked havoc inside Karhold. The keep had never fallen from outside attacks in thousands of years, and yet on his watch, it has fallen. He wanted to cry, but he was denied even that by the sorcery of Jon Snow. When all was said and done, he watched on helplessly as the ancestral home of Karstarks being overrun by its enemies. He followed Jon Snow into the quarters of young Alice, and he prayed to the old gods that she had escaped somehow, but it was not to be. "Lady Karstark, it is an honor to meet you in person. I am Jon Snow, and we have a lot to talk about regarding your father," Merritt heard the bastard say, and he couldn't help but wish the smug bastard dead for ruining everything. Jon observed the brave face Alice Karstark was projecting and sighed internally. He knew the Karstarks were wronged terribly by Robb, and frankly, he doubted that the bad blood Robb started will ever go away. Lord Karstark lost 2 sons to Jaime Lannister, and Robb cut his head off for killing 2 Lannister boys. While the murder of Lannister boys was wrong, Robb could have at least punished the man by sending him over to Karhold instead of taking his head. The Karstarks were kin, and when Robb took Lord Karstark's head, he became a kinslayer. The Starks have married into this house for many generations, and many Karstark women have married into Winterfell as well. Now, it fell to Jon to clean up the bad blood between the 2 houses, and it was not helped when he had to war with the Karstarks. "I do apologize for what happened with your grandfather and brothers. Robb should have never done what he did, and if I was there I would have stopped him at any cost," started Jon, but he was greeted with an unimpressed stare from Alice Karstark. "Is that why you are here, Jon Snow? You broke your oaths to the Night's Watch and invaded the north with a wildling army behind your back. You killed so many of my people because we decided to stand against these wildlings. I doubt you are here to apologize. If so, a raven would have sufficed." Alice scoffed and stared coldly into his eyes. "The Maester of Castle Black is dead, and that means ravens are hard to come by these days." Jon joked, but he could see that was having no effect on her. She was a Stark all right, he admitted in the confines of his mind. "I didn't break the oaths to the Night's Watch, and I had a reason to let the free folk settle south of the wall," said Jon, and all he got was a raised eyebrow. "What do you want me to say? At least have the decency to construct well-formed lies." "I am not stupid, you know." Alice sneered. "You won't believe me unless I show you." Jon sighed and began to loosen his boiled leather armor and the black tunic underneath. He noted the apprehensive look she was giving him, and he realized he should have explained himself first, but he plowed on. With some effort he took off the armor, and his upper body was free to the naked eye. He watched curiously as Alice Karstark's eyes widened comically. It was the first reaction he managed to glean from her, and he enjoyed it immensely. "As you can see, I was stabbed several times in the heart, and yet I am still alive. The truth is I died and a Red Priestess resurrected me. So technically I died in service of the Night's Watch, and my watch ended with my death. The new Lord Commander is Edison Tollett, and he as well as the rest of my former brothers agreed my watch has ended." Jon could see that his words were having the desired effect as Alice looked on at his scars in wonder, and a healthy dose of curiosity. "I was offered to be legitimized by King Stannis, and he offered me Winterfell long before I became Lord Commander of Night's Watch. If I really wanted to abandon my watch, then I would have done so, and I would be sitting in Winterfell with Roose Bolton and his mad son's head on a spike. As for why I let the wildlings pass the wall, let's just say the cold winds are rising and the dead rises with it," said Jon to the disbelieving looks from Alice. "You are mad. The White Walkers are fairy tales told for scaring children." Alice scoffed. "Are they, my lady? The long night is coming and the others are marching on the wall. I fought them at Hardhome, and if you ask any brother of the Night's Watch, all of them will tell you the same. The others killed thousands of free folk at Hardhome, and now they match with them to the wall, 100,000 strong, perhaps more. The North needs to be united, as does all the 7 kingdoms. Do you think Ramsay Snow can unite the North? He is a fool who enjoys torture and rape as sport. A mad dog that needs to be put down, and I will." Jon took a deep breath as he stood up from his seat and stared out of the window into the night sky. He could see the snow falling, and even with his upper torso exposed, he was not feeling that much cold. It was strange, but he had the feeling that it was because Regal was closing the gap steadily. That was the only reason he could come up with so far. "He raped my sister, and he has my brother. I will attack Winterfell, and I will take it by force. Anyone that stand against me I will kill without a shred of mercy. House Umber has already fallen to me, and I have put Moore's and Hother Umber's heads on spikes. Even if I sympathize with the grievances House Karstark has against House Stark, I will kill your brother, and wipe his house out if I have to. For what Ramsay did to my sister there will be a reckoning, and anyone that stands with him will be wiped out root and stem," Jon stated coldly, startling Alice, who was now looking at him with a healthy dose of fear. "What do you want me to do?" Alice asked as the silence just continued to drag on. "I want you to write to your brother and ask him to abandon his post in Winterfell. Ask him to march his army back from Winterfell, or be prepared to face extermination. He will not have to join me. He can return to his castle and stay there for the duration of this war. When the time comes, your house will be compensated in any way your lord brother wishes, so long as it is reasonable. Convey this to your brother, Lady Alice, and this will be the only chance that I will extend. I will give him 1 week to remove his armies from Winterfell, but if I see him in the field, remind him what happened to houses that rebelled with Boltons in the past. Tell him winter is coming," said Jon, and he took his leave, leaving Alice in her room with a quill and a piece of parchment. Just before he closed the door of the room, he paused. "Do find me when you are finished, and make sure you are dressed to ward off the cold. We will be traveling to the wall soon enough," said Jon, and with that parting shot, he closed the door, leaving Alice to her thoughts. It didn't take long for Alice to come to a decision, and she started to pen a letter to her father. As she penned the letter, Jon saw to it that the white sun of Karstarks was taken down, and replaced them with direwolf banners that Sansa had hastily sewed for him before he departed. He saved one for last hearth, as he had forgotten to place one in the previously conquered castle. There was still some work to be done, as he will have to transport the caravans to the wall. The supplies of food, medicine, and weapons that the Karstarks and Umbers have graciously provided had to be put to good use. As they say, there is no rest for the wicked, and it was a long way back to the wall.